In this video, we are going to look at arrays in JavaScript. An array is a data structure. So a data structure is used to store data in a program. And an array is a data structure which, unlike variables, can contain more than one value at a time. So when we create variables, variables can only store one value at a time. And those values can be changed throughout a program when we modify variables in our code, but they can only contain one value at a time. So for example, an integer or a float variable can only contain one number at a time. That number could be made up of multiple digits, but it's just one number. So an integer variable could contain the number 14. And a string variable can contain only one value at a time as well. It might contain a word or a sentence, or letters, or just a combination of different characters, but it's stored as one value. But arrays, on the other hand, can contain more than one value at a time. They're kind of like lists. So they could, an array could store several different numbers, like a list of numbers, or integers, or floats. It can store several strings, so it could contain a list of different words or a list of different sentences, different strings. So arrays are kind of like lists. They store a bunch of different elements in them. So each item in an array is called an element, and elements in an array, they're separated by commas and stored within a set of square brackets. And each item can be accessed individually using an index. So each item has a number, a digit that represents its position in the array or the list. So we'll look at how to create and access arrays and access elements in arrays. So creating an array starts off very much the same as creating a variable. You use the var keyword and then you give the array a name. So we've been looking at how to create variables like, maybe a variable called user that might contain a username. We might want to create an array that contains a list of usernames. So for example, I might create an array called users, and then we use the assignment operator, the equal sign, to assign some values. And those values are going to be stored within square brackets. Type in the square brackets, and if I wanted to just create an empty array that doesn't have any values in it, I could just end it at that, just add a semicolon to end that statement, and it's an empty array, and we could add information to it later. But if I want to start storing some values in here, I can put them in separated by commas. So if this was just, say, a list of numbers, or something like that, I could just store each number separated by commas. But because this is going to be a list of users, I need to store string values. They're going to be names, so they'll be strings. So I'll use the quotation marks, and I'll have Joe, and then I might have another user, so I'll add a comma. I'll have Sally, maybe a couple more users. All right, so we have 4 users stored as strings in this array. Each of these is an element. So Joe is an element, Sally is an element, Max is an element, and Alice is an element in this array. They're each separated by commas. All right. Now, if I wanted to just display one of these users' names, I can refer to that element in the array using an index. And in programming, in the JavaScript programming language, indexing starts from 0. So we start counting from 0. So Joe is element 0, or has an index of 0. Sally has an index of 1. Max has an index of 2. And Alice has an index of 3, and so on if there are more elements in this array. So to access one of these elements, I might want to log it in the console. So I could say console.log, right? And to access an element in this array, I type in the name of the array, and then in square brackets, I can refer to the index. So if I say users 0, right, just like that. If I go to my page and refresh the page, we see Joe there. If I say users 1, then we should see Sally. All right, so indexing or counting starts from 0. So what I've said is get the users array and just display whatever is in index position 0, which is Joe. And then I've said index position 1, which is Sally. All right. Now, we can, as I said before, we can create an empty array. So I could just create it like that, right? And then what I could do is start adding some users to this array. So I can create an empty array, nothing in the square brackets, and then I could say users 0 equals Joe. And then if I want to add another value, I could say users 1 equals Sally. Oops, users 2 equals Max, and so on. All right, so I can add items to the array that way, and we can still see those two first values when I log them in the console. So you can either create an array already containing some values, or you can create an array that is empty and then add values to them. You can also create an array. We just undo all of that. We can create an array with some values, and then we can add more values to it afterwards. So we've got Joe in position 0, Sally in 1, Max 2, Alice 3. So I could say users 4 to add a fifth element in index position 4. And this might be maybe Bob. And if I console.log users 4, we see Bob. All right. We can, if we want as well, just have a look at the whole users array, but it won't be formatted in any particular way. We'll just see there's 5 elements, and these are all the elements in the array if we log that to the console. But to access individual elements in the array, we need to refer to their index. Okay. That's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to look at how to use different functions or methods to add more items to the end of the array, or to the beginning of an array, or to insert items into maybe into the middle of the array. We'll look at how to delete items from an array as well, and how to find out how many items in an array. So we're going to look at a few different methods, different functions that we can use to work with arrays in the next video. But that's an introduction to arrays in this video. Thanks for watching.